I don't think anybody needs reminding that the year is almost over, but I am going to say the year is almost over, friends, and I still have many things I want to read, and I don't know how I'm gonna do it. Hello, friends. Me and my emotional support water bottle are coming to you today with a dilemma, a list, and hopefully a plan and a solution. I can't be the only one that at this point of the year, with 2.5 months left of 2023, sorry if I'm giving anybody an existential crisis, by the way, 2.5 months left of the year, there are still many things I want to read that I said I would get to this year and that I would finally read, and yet we have not gotten to them. And so I thought it would be nice just to keep it at the forefront of my brain so that when I am making my monthly TBR jar videos, if any prompt comes up that fits any of these books, I can have these books again at the forefront of my mind and I can potentially read them before the year's over. And so today we have got a list of 6 books I want to read before the year's over. Kind of plain and simple, very straightforward. Thankfully, all of these books are giving compulsively readable vibes. I may be wrong about that, but some of them I've already started or attempted to read, or I've already read the first chapters of, so I don't think it's unfair to say that, because I have wanted to binge these books at some point or another, and then there was just something else happening and I did not carry on with reading the book. But this year, hopefully it'll happen before the year ends. And I'm starting out with a little duo because I don't know which way my heart will swing, but either of these books I'd like to read before the year's over, so either Heartless or Renegades, but one of these, because not only have I been told that I would love both of these, I have been told, like, Mel, can you please read it and vlog it? Particularly for Heartless, I was surprised, and I still am quite amazed at the amount of people that have come up and said, I want you to vlog this book, read it, I want to see your thoughts on it. I didn't think this was like such a popular book, or maybe amongst our crowd here in the channel. Maybe people really enjoy this book, because I thought that out of all of Marissa Meyer's books, this was probably like the most underrated one, because I really have not heard a lot of people talk about Heartless, whereas Renegades I feel had its moment and it was more popular. But either of these would be fun before the year ends. And in Heartless we have got a Queen of Hearts retelling from Alice in Wonderland, except that this version of Catherine, also known as the Queen, loves baking, and she actually wants to open her own bakery, set up her own business, and just do what she loves, except that under the pressure of her mother, she believes or is pushed in the direction of canoodling with the king, because the king has taken an interest in her and could potentially propose so that she becomes queen eventually. But she has another little side romance, a nice little side gig with a guy named Jest, except that this relationship is very secret, and this is also seemingly the very first person that she has felt true attraction for, and not just like deluding herself into thinking that she is attracted to said person. And that is kind of where the book goes. And so I'm curious about this, because again, so many of you guys have hyped it up in the past that I'm curious to see what it's about, what's going to happen, and just how good it is based on everybody's opinions on it. And then on the other end, we have got Renegades, which I have had my eyes set on for a while now. When I started my channel in 2020, I wanted to read this, I didn't. In 2021, I wanted to read this and I didn't, and you can guess how the story keeps on going up until I bought it this year, and I'm hoping to get to it before the year ends, because I love superheroes. I love supervillains. I love people with powers and extraordinary abilities, and seeing how different authors or forms of media explore that, and also kind of explore the conversation surrounding heroes and villains. And so I am quite excited to read this. But in Renegades, we have a world where the Renegades are a group or a syndicate of prodigies, people who have supernatural or extraordinary abilities, and in a time of chaos, it is said, they were the ones to reset it back to order and kind of keep everything contained and orderly and safe for all of the citizens of, I'm assuming, the city this takes place in. And we particularly start this story with Nova, the main character, who works for a villain, therefore by extension maybe is some sort of villain herself, and she has got her own reasons for hating the Renegades and wanting revenge on them, and said villain is helping her out with that, except that she ends up meeting one of the Renegades. And I will assume maybe something romantic happens that makes her kind of stray away from everything and kind of re-question why she's doing things. And so it sounds exciting. I've heard really amazing things, and it's a little bit of a throwback. Honestly, both of these are. When I look at Renegades, it just makes me think of like 2016. When did this book even come out? I'm not sure. Okay, so it came out in 2017, so I'm not that far off, but it just gives me 2016 vibes. The first page is just everything. This is what I read that convinced me to buy the book back when I bought it in April. We were all villains in the beginning. For hundreds of years, prodigies were feared by the rest of the world. We became hunted, tormented, feared, and oppressed. We were believed to be witches and demons, freaks and abominations. We were stoned and hanged and set afire while crowds gathered to watch with cruel eyes, proud to be ridding the world of one more pariah. They were right to be afraid. That just keeps on going, but it sounds so good. It sounds so good. Children of Fallen Gods by Carissa Broadbent. This is the sequel to Daughter of No Worlds, which, if you guys know, I read earlier this year. I was absolutely obsessed with it. Immediately bought book 2, got book 2, proceeded to start it, and you can guess what happened in the end. Because of the Parson with commitment issues, sometimes I just can't commit to series because I don't want them to end, or I'm intimidated by them, or my ADHD just doesn't allow me to hyperfixate enough, so I move on to something else, and I'm kind of like a rat. I just start nibbling at things, and then I don't actually like finish them. And then I go back to them, and then it's like a whole thing. As Tomorrow times 3, it knows it all too well. Penman version. However, Children of Fallen Gods is definitely something I want to finish before the year ends, because I absolutely am loving this series, and this series really helped me kind of like reconnect or revitalize alongside Once Upon a Broken Heart and Hellbent to my love of fantasy and fantasy romance. And ever since I read Daughter of No World, I have just been in a mood this year where all of the fantasies I pick up, I want to have a romance subplot, or I want them to be romance heavy without obviously giving up the plot and sacrificing any other components of the story. And this one has it all, which is why it's so good. And in this one, we follow Tasana after she buys her freedom, and she is hell-bent on securing the freedom of every single other person that finds themselves in the same situation she was, except that she can't do that alone because it's quite an ambitious endeavor as all things go. And so she enlists the help of the Order, except that the Order has interests of their own, and they figure out that Miss Tasana has powers actually, and in order to help her, the one condition is that she train and develop her powers, really hone them in, that she perfects the skill of her abilities, and then they can talk about saving or rescuing anybody. And so they pair her up with a trainer, Maxentarius, who is super powerful, and these two will go from very much disliking each other out of nature to then becoming friends, and slowly but surely becoming a couple. And it's so good because it's trainer-trainee, which I know some people don't like, but I personally love it because it gives me Winter Widow vibes, and I'm just saying, my fan fiction heart thrived with the dynamic in this one. I personally really loved it, and at its core, it's a friends to lovers, which honestly I want to see more of, and this book just does it so well because not only is the plot super interesting and the world building and the magic system is super unique as well, but the way that the romance develops in the series is so good because it doesn't happen out of nowhere. We see the characters bond a lot and open up to each other and be vulnerable and be there in general as friends before they become anything romantic. And so the development of the events in the first book were super fantastic, and the powers that the main character starts developing as we go on is giving very much Dark Phoenix, Wanda Maximoff vibes, and I personally adore that as well. Two of my favorite girly pops in the Marvel universe, if I say so myself, even beyond like the movies, like I'm talking comics wise, like they're so freaking good. And so I want to see what happens in the second one. I did start it again, got 62 pages in, and a girl has yet to finish it, so hopefully I can finish this big boy, this chunker before the year's over. I'm not going to lie, friends, I am astounded at the fact that in both of the TBR prom jar videos that I have done so far, I have yet to include this book some way, shape, or form, because I have been excited about this book for the better part of this year, and I have been wanting to read it for the better part of this year, and guess who hasn't read it or picked it up? And I think, personally, that's a crime. And I'm talking about the fine print. I, again, have looked, stared, opened this book and I have not read it yet, even though I am so freaking excited for it. I have never read a Lauren Asher book, so if I end up reading this one, or if I end up reading the Throttled series, or at least book 1, Throttled, either or will be like my first Lauren Asher book. So I guess it's kind of like a toss-up because I love the idea of racers and Formula 1 and fast cars. Listen, I am not proud of myself, but I also used to read Fast and Furious fanfiction back in the day. Desperate times call for desperate measures. I personally love cars. I grew up in a family surrounded by people that love cars as well, and so reading a romance that centers around cars sounds fantastic. However, this though, I do own physically, and so I'm trying to grab things from my shelves, friends. But in this one, our main guy, Mr. Rowan, I believe his name is, indeed, is basically like the Walt Disney of the romance book. He is literally in the business of theme parks and making people's like dreams come to reality. And so the book starts out with him hiring Zara, who applies to a job in his company while being drunk. It wasn't supposed to be like this serious thing that she did. She was literally just shitting on one of the rides at the theme park, and she seemingly didn't want like really anything to do with this company or this man, but he ends up hiring her and he ends up kissing her, and so things go to shit very quickly, and then we kind of go from there. It is a romance series, which means that every single book follows a different brother, if I'm not mistaken, because there are several of them, and so I'm excited to read this, and I know people really love the second and third books. I think even more than the first one, so we'll see what happens, but I do own this, and I think like the covers or like the spines have changed now, and I think that the print is like a little bit larger. I don't know what I'm gonna do moving forward when I need to buy like books 2 and 3, but at least I have this one. This is the self-published edition. I have this, and I'm excited about it because the need for like a rich hot dom is really rising at the moment, and so I feel like I'd have a great time with this. So we'll see, but maybe soon. The Blood Trials is another one, and if you've been here for at least the last year, then you would have seen me talk about this because I did start this last year, and then I got distracted, as all things go. Last year was a really rough year in terms of reading because I was constantly in and out of reading slumps, which was not great, and so my experience with this book unfortunately suffered from that, but I am determined to read this quite soon because it's another like trainee romance subplot in the story, which I absolutely love, and the plot just sounds incredible. So we follow Ikenna after her grandfather is murdered, and her grandfather taught her everything she knows about hand-to-hand combat, everything she knows about how to use her blood gift, except that all of these things surrounding her practice and her abilities need to be kept a secret. And she does the entire opposite of what she is advised to do by her grandfather before he passes, and she enlists in the Praetorian Trials, which is a set of trials that only a handful of people survive, and she does so all in the hopes of finding out what truly happened to her grandfather, and I'm assuming seeking some sort of retribution. And the book dives deep into conversations about misogyny and race, which I always think is super interesting in the sphere of fantasy and sci-fi, because this is also an intersectional book, which means that it resides in 2 different genres, which is always quite fun. It's very fantasy sci-fi, which I personally really adore seeing, and so I'm quite excited to read this. Liv absolutely loves this. She's actually the one that got me into the mood of reading this, and if I'm not mistaken, I also think she got me the book, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's like a 2 for 2, and I really do have to read this sometime soon. And it's a duology too, which I didn't realize, but the very last bit says, magic and technology converge in the first part of this stunning debut duology, where loyalty to oneself and one's blood is more important than anything. I didn't realize this was a duology, and the second book is already out, which means I can read this, and then at the start of 2024, hopefully, finish out the duology. Another one that I told myself I would read earlier this year when I did my try a chapter vlog, and then I didn't because again I got distracted with other things, but I'm very excited to read this book. Like, you guys have no idea. If I'm not mistaken, I do think polyamory is part of it, and I am so freaking excited. Vampires and polyamory are just great things to mix up together, and I personally love it. And so Silver Under Nightfall by Rin Chupeco is something I want to read before the year ends. I'm scared because a lot of these books are on the longer end and I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but this is just where we've landed, friends. And in this one, we follow Remy, who is a vampire hunter and an outcast amongst the hunters. He is looked down on a lot because of who his father is and also because of his mother fleeing and eloping with a vampire, which kind of goes against everything the hunters believe in. And we follow Remy in this book as a new type of vampire comes about, and he is hell-bent on investigating that alone, except that alone doesn't quite happen because he ends up partnering up with a vampire heiress and a vampire lord that she is engaged to. And things kind of go from there on the romance end of things, but then also with investigating this new mutation of vampire and a virus that is very quickly spreading on the land. And so I'm quite excited about this. And I think even more so than Rin Chupeco's The Bone Witch series, this is the one that I have heard the most amazing things about. Also, the cover is absolutely out of this world. Like, they really nailed this damn cover. I don't know if this was supposed to be a series or a standalone or where we kind of stand on that, but we'll see. We'll see what happens with this one because I want to love it as equally as everybody else has been loving it. This Woven Kingdom by Takara Mafi is another one I want to read this year. You guys, I loved the Shatter Me series. Back then, it used to only be a trilogy, way back when I read it, and I loved it back then. I never actually finished like the newer installments into the end of the series because, again, just thought it was a trilogy when I was reading it as it was coming out. And ever since, I have had a Takara Mafi hole in my life, and I really want to read this Woven Kingdom and potentially love it. And it's got two of my favorite tropes: a lost queen or heiress that's supposed to step up to the throne to save the people, and forbidden romance. Forbidden romance is kind of like a double-edged sword for me because sometimes it's a really big hit, sometimes not so much, but I just trust Miss Mafi. And in this one, we follow Alice, and I'm gonna say like that because I can't for the life of me figure out how it's pronounced in English, so I'm just gonna say Alice. Hi. And she is just supposed to be a disposable servant and not the lost heir for a Jinn kingdom that hides in plain sight. And then on the opposite end of things, on the other POV, we have got the Crown Prince Cameron, who has long since heard of the premonitions of the king's death, which is sort of something that seems inevitable in this world. And he'd never thought that the girly pop he has got his eyes set on is the one that's going to be involved, I will assume, in the death of said king, or if not, then at the very least upending the entire world and his little life. I have heard absolutely incredible things about this Woven Kingdom. I don't think I've heard a single negative thing about this book, and so I'm excited to go into this hopefully before the year's over. You want to know what the funniest thing is? I have had this book in my shelves for the longest time, and although I was interested, I wasn't overly interested. Then my brother comes around, he grabs the book, he's like, damn, this looks super interesting. I think he reads like a page or two, and he's like, damn, why haven't you read this? And I'm like, actually, I don't know. Then I read the first chapter and I was like, damn, why haven't I read this? And so we find ourselves here, friends. And that is it, friends. Those are all of the books that I am hoping to read before the year is over. Again, I'm not putting all my bets on reading all of the books, but at least if I could read like 4 out of the 6, I think that is a win. Honestly, strategically, if I could include half of these books on my November TBR and then the other half in my December TBR, I think we'd be covered. I think we'd be on our road to success. So we'll see how all things go as October ends and new months start. We'll keep that in mind as I build future TBRs. We'll see where life takes us, but give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and also let a girl know down in the comments, do you have any books that you're hoping to read before the year is over? Do you share the sentiment on any of these books that you also want to read them before the year ends? Have you read any of these? Let a girl know any and all things down in the comments, because I'm quite curious to see if there's any of these that I should like really prioritize very soon, because you guys think I could love it. So do let a girl know. And if you reach the end of the video, let us leave a moon emoji. We have got the Blood Trials and Silver Under Nightfall, which both have kind of like moon-esque themes. So let's leave a moon emoji, whichever you want, down in the comments if you reach the very end. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already for more content like this. And if you want to support the channel further, I do have a Patreon. It's always linked down below alongside all of my socials. Love you all so much, and I shall see you on the next one.
Goodbye!